The girl felt amazing that warm sunny morning with birds chirping in the leaves. Sparkling in the sunlight, the other maids were celebrating finishing the laundry at last and complaining about their stiff backs. Another one bragged that she'd bulked up a little these past few days, adding that their job was harder than blacksmithing. Then, feeling totally drained, they decided to take a short break, because if they went right back, they'd just get swamped again. That's when they noticed Princess Grace walking by, the one everyone in the empire thought was so beautiful. The girls wondered how happy the king must be to have a daughter, since she could wear whatever clothes she wanted, but Sienna didn't think Grace was pretty, noting that her dresses were clearly the wrong size, like 40 pounds too big. The girl explained it was like dressing a baby piglet and suspected she was in serious pain wearing that corset. It looked like someone had wrapped the princess in a steel cable by force, and she still had to walk around and smile. The maids were amazed she could tell all that, but she didn't admit that just a few months ago, she was a princess herself. When she was born, her mom was the queen, her dad was the king, and she was little Princess Sienna Aselant Fonsalite. Like any other princess, she thought she'd lucked out in life. But her mom died when she was only 10. Her dad decided to remarry to strengthen the kingdom, and Sienna really missed her mom and felt super lonely. Her stepmom announced that in the late queen's name, she'd do everything she could to make the girl a proper princess, and as Sienna got her education, she was bullied a lot. Her stepmom thought she was way too dumb for her age. Then the queen declared that from now on, for every mistake the princess made, she'd be punished with the whip. Sienna tried her best, but because of the corset and the super heavy dress, she couldn't bow properly to greet her stepmom. She felt like she was about to die. But she didn't give up. But once again, she messed up the bow and the queen saw it as disobedience. The queen said the princess was a pain in the butt and declared she had no right to call herself a princess and that the king couldn't take her to banquets. She also explained that it was all for the good of their kingdom, so the little girl shouldn't be mad or angry at her. She raised the whip to strike the girl but stopped cold when the king walked in. The princess silently begged him for help, but he just said the queen wasn't wrong to discipline a kid who's slacking off. Sienna felt lost and betrayed. In that moment, she couldn't believe she was to blame for all this. All she wanted was to be happy. But she was done being a princess and just wanted out. She dreamed of escaping, remembering her mom, but knew she had to endure it all until she turned 18. By then, their castle had fallen to another kingdom, the conqueror of the entire continent. Soon, the infamous Blood Prince Rashid Labizuan showed up, the first prince of the Labizuan Empire. He announced that they hadn't answered his letter demanding surrender, so he came in person. Then he asked if they'd surrender to him. Sienna figured this was her shot. If they gave up, they wouldn't die. But the king declared he wasn't about to serve some low-life invader, demanding they just kill him now. In that instant, Prince Rashid lopped his head clean off, declaring they were the first to refuse to bow and, get this, he'd planned to spare them, kill no one. But the whole thing was so boring it didn't even faze him. Then the princess saw him heading her way, but she didn't want to die. She was still just a kid. She couldn't believe it was ending like this. And she fell to his feet begging for help, saying she'd do anything. Rashid figured she was offering herself as a wife, but Sienna insisted she was nowhere near ready for that and had nothing feminine about her. She even said she couldn't compare to the kingdom's top beauties, and although she looked fearless, she really just wanted to survive. Next, the girl explained that she was super healthy, could embroider, and brew adelicious, fragrant tea. After saying all that, the princess declared she could be the perfect mate for the prince. Afterwards, even she couldn't believe she'd spouted such ridiculous nonsense. And then she looked at the prince and noticed how handsome he was. Everyone said he was the greatest warrior on the continent. But Sienna decided he was just using his charm. Rashid noticed then that her face was round and soft, like a bun made from the purest wheat flour. Then he finally agreed to let the princess work as a servant in the imperial palace and ordered her to be untied. The girl was overjoyed to have survived this hellhole. Then she thanked the prince and introduced herself by name. She also assured him that she would never forget his kindness. While he was thinking about how he'd picked a cutie, so Sienna became a servant in the imperial palace. Though she could get bummed out wondering how she'd gotten so unlucky, but now, thanks to her, fresh bread was baked, clothes were getting clean, and the garden was becoming even more beautiful. Before, she had to wear a corset that squeezed her body all day and smile like a doll. Now her life was completely different. And Sienna even found it more fun and much more comfortable being a servant, which she thought was great. Now the girl wanted to be a maid for the rest of her life. And for the sake of cleanliness, she often did things even when she wasn't asked. The other maids figured she was trying to suck up to the senior maids and explained that she had to ask what to do first. Mostly. It was this servant girl named Jean who was pissed, telling Sienna she was just a slave from a conquered country anyway. She also made it clear this girl would never make the main maid squad and always treated her like dirt. That's when another one, Choo-Choo, walked in and yelled at Jean for picking on the slow workers instead of helping out. She also threatened the screamer, saying if she kept it up, she'd report her to the head maids. Jean backed down then, but told Choo-Choo she could keep playing around with these know-nothing kids. Then she dumped a bucket of water and told Sienna she could keep doing what she loved best, cleaning. After that, everyone scattered, and Choo-Choo, who was left, advised the newbie to fight back. She explained they only messed with her cause she took it silently. But Sienna had no clue others were even bothering her. See, for the former princess who'd been bullied her whole life by the new queen, this kind of grumbling seemed kind of sweet. Now the girl understood they were showing her disrespect. And Choo-Choo shared that considering her family, fighting back wouldn't be easy. She knew that girl was from a respected family in the kingdom. So whatever she did, she was basically guaranteed to become a maid. The other two trainees are also trying to get something out of Jean, which is why they're always following her around. So she just chills, hoping they'll pick her based on her family. But Choo-Choo was just as much a trainee as Sienna. She's got a strong, solid build, which makes her one of the more promising trainees. Plus, she doesn't have family connections to fall back on. So there's no guarantee she'll officially become a maid. Jean understood that Sienna had nowhere else to go either. And yet somehow, she'd become a maid trainee. That meant someone helped her. And the princess figured it was the emperor of this country. Or maybe it was because, forgetting her princess's honor, the girl had bowed to the floor and begged for mercy. Sienna thought that in that moment, she'd seemed pathetic or ridiculous to Rashid, that he didn't sympathize with her at all. And it was just a whim, but she couldn't admit all that to Jean. So she just claimed that no one had helped her. Just then, Sol, the emperor's personal guard, walked in and saw him playing with his little critters. The emperor himself was stunning, with an angelic face that captivated everyone who laid eyes on him. He even mesmerized enemies on the battlefield. Sol, having grown up with him, knew this all too well. He asked the guard how that girl was doing, and Sol reported that she was doing fine. He added that Sienna wasn't used to physical labor, so she's a bit lost. But she's smart and learns fast. Still, it'll take time for her to become an official maid. Sol wondered why Rashid was so worried about her. He didn't even know himself. He figured he just felt sorry for her. Since he destroyed her country and killed her family, the guard was surprised he destroyed so many lives. So why was he even thinking about it now? Then Su asked the emperor to be honest and admit that he's always been into girls like that. Small with big eyes and seemingly harmless. And it was true. Rashid, the so-called bloody emperor, this cruel and handsome man just adored animals. Saul was still blown away every time he saw it. And the emperor admitted Sienna did have something similar to them, but Saul argued you can't just promote a maid trainee whose skills haven't been proven to full-fledged maid status. Rashid agreed and decided they should test her abilities themselves to see if she had any potential. The maids headed to lunch, which was meatless again, but Sienna said they shouldn't be focused on proper eating etiquette. She claimed they could eat as much as they wanted now. But the others figured she thought that way, because she was from another country. Sienna also thought it wasn't necessary to keep up a conversation, so this place and position seemed like paradise to her. Gian even yoked, asking how she could eat such garbage, and the girl realized she was being made fun of again. Sienna figured she should cry after words like that, but she just kept a straight face. Jean didn't get what was up with this girl and why she thought everything was normal, saying it wouldn't make her cool. Choo-Choo thought that girl being from another country should worry more, and then yelled at the Grum for always picking on the quiet one. But Jean pointed out that she'd defended her before, then reminded her that she was in charge and to pay attention to the vibe. Then they got into this back and forth that reminded Sion of a grizzly bear wrestling a hyena. Just then, Miss Lip, the etiquette instructeur, walked in and immediately asked what was going on. Seeing two students arguing, the two of them instantly clamped up, and Lip ordered them not to cause trouble in front of her, no matter how bad they wanted to fight. Then she announced that an official document had come from above and that a tea ceremony would be held in a few days. All the students, along with Lip, would be serving the guests who came. And it was important to follow strict etiquette and not make mistakes. A maid from the main staff would also be working with them. But the girls started wondering who would be at the tea ceremony. They guessed it would be the wife of some big-shot aristocrat, or maybe a beautiful princess from a neighboring country. But Lip explained that it was women who grow fruit for delivery to the palace who were coming. The fruit they've been growing for the palace for years now is seriously incredible. And this tea ceremony is to show our gratitude. Plus, there's training in the morning before the tea party. So everyone needs to meet in the garden right after they wake up. And Sienna was stoked she got picked for this gig. Jean, though, was pissed. She had to wait on some old biddies and thought this job was perfect for the newbie. Then she snuck that Sienna wouldn't even be at the reception if it wasn't to service those ladies. The ex-princess understood that those ladies were just working class, which is why they trusted maids to serve them. It didn't require special care. Otherwise, they'd have sent the official maids to the reception, but it still seemed weird. The next morning, Lee started teaching the apprentices tea etiquette and, first of all, they can't forget they're in the Imperial Palace. The girls gotta learn this right so they don't embarrass the Imperial family. Choo-Choo was happy that even though the official work hasn't started yet, she was already allowed to try herself as a maid. She said she'd give it her all but worried her drive and skill levels might not match up. Then she started pouring tea. And Lip corrected her, reminding her not to splash drops everywhere. The other trainees teased her, calling her a muscle-bound idiot, saying tea wasn't the beer her minor dad drinks. Choo-Choo got angry at the other trainees for saying that, and she was also bummed about getting scolded by the teacher. Next up was Jean's turn to pour tea, and she did everything perfectly and neatly. Earning praise from the teacher, the girl was thrilled about it. Since she'd been taught by a famous etiquette instructor from the capital, Lee thought Jean wasn't the kind of person who should even be a trainee maid. Plus, rumors were going around that she'd become the head maid and serve Her Majesty the Empress. Sienna herself saw that she did okay, but figured it was only for a first-timer and still just at a trainee maid level. Back when the carefully selected maids made even the smallest mistake, the queen would punish them immediately. These maids, trying to soothe the Empress's bad mood, poured and served tea with more finesse than any noble lady, compared to what Sienna had seen before. Everyone here seemed clumsy and awkward. Now it was her turn to practice pouring tea. And for now, that was enough. She wasn't a princess anymore, not wanting to stand out because of her past. She poured tea slowly and deliberately, but with a hint of clumsiness. Sienna really wanted to stay in the palace, and she knew she had to be quiet to do it. After afternoon training, the trainees had to go to their assigned places and do the work they couldn't do in the morning. That meant cleaning the palace, stoking fires, and washing dishes. But everyone managed. Then they brought out a snack made from leftover bread, considered a treat for the starving trainee maids. Sienna was grateful, thinking it was worth working in the kitchen for this, and was glad they'd been assigned here. Suddenly, she noticed Choo-Choo acting strange today and barely talking, so she offered her some food. So she asked the former princess if it was tough learning from the maids. Sienna said they weren't really harsh and admitted she was even a little jealous. The princess remembered that Choo Choo got the most flack during the tea lesson today, which is probably why she was so upset. Before this, the student was always praised, but today was the first time this happened, and she took it way too hard. Turns out, this was also Choo Choo's first real test, and she admitted Jean was right. And she'd never actually had tea, plus, she has zero experience that could help her, and everyone noticed she was the worst at it. Now Choo Choo was scared the guests would be mad at her, and Sienna decided she had to help this girl out. So she offered to practice together every day during their break. Just the two of them, Choo Choo was thrilled, hoping she'd teach her everything and thought she was incredibly kind. After that, they started practicing every night. And Sienna explained that, first, you gotta boil the right amount of water. Alright. Next, you gotta throw a spoonful of tea leaves into the warmed up teapot. And then immediately pour boiling water over 'em. After that, strain it through a tea strainer. And I should mention, to become a pro at this stuff, you need a ton of practice. Over time, Choo Choo was getting better. Not perfect yet. But she wasn't messing up the order or spilling tea anymore. Sienna was now relieved that Choo Choo definitely wouldn't be accused of mistreating the guests. And not a drop would go to waste. Choo Choo thanked her friend for the lessons, thinking that Sienna had taught her way better than the other maids ever could, but the former princess modestly explained that Choo Choo herself was trying hard. That's why she was improving, 'cause she's a diligent student. Also, during their training sessions, they became pretty close, and Choo Choo told her partner a lot about herself. She confessed that she's from a mining town in the east, and her dad's a miner who works every single day. He has to feed 13 kids, which surprised Sienna. And Choo Choo added that they're a really close-knit family. But it's tough for them to make ends meet, which is why she applied for the maid job to help her dad out. She admitted official maids got paid way better, and she wanted her little siblings to eat meat every day. Then Choo Choo started asking Sienna how she ended up here, figuring her story was probably complicated since she came from overseas. That's when the girl confessed she used to be a princess of a tiny kingdom, and the crown prince assigned her here. He explained he felt bad for her since she'd lost her country and her parents. Choo Choo couldn't believe Sienna was talking about Rashid, the bloodthirsty prince who never lost a fight. Even more unbelievable was that a former princess had actually met him. Sienna suddenly remembered overhearing stories from the maids as she walked by and realized he was a big deal. The girls whispered that His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince, was even more stunning than a statue. They gushed about how his silver hair shimmered in the sunlight and his violet eyes were as bright as the Milky Way. Then Choo Choo confessed to the princess she just dreamed of seeing the prince, and Sienna confirmed he really was gorgeous. Then she wanted to know if he really was a cold-hearted bastard. Despite being so damn good-looking, Sienna confirmed it too, saying he'd wiped out her entire family. And that's when Choo Choo apologized for blurting that out without thinking. The princess still couldn't bring herself to talk about her true feelings and insisted she was fine since those people had made her life hell. But then Choo Choo was like, no way. That's messed up. She couldn't believe she was okay with it, considering the prince murdered her whole family. But Sienna just repeated herself, explaining that it had been a long time, so there was no reason to get so worked up about it. Choo Choo still knew she was only saying that to keep her from feeling guilty. She also pointed out that the former princess was super kind, then hugged her and repeated it a few more times. From that day on, Sienna's attitude toward her friend totally changed, and Choo Choo started treating her differently too. One evening while cleaning up, Jean snuck up on the princess trying to scare her. But Choo Choo stepped in front of her like a mama bear, warning her not to even think about saying anything out of line to Sienna. If Jean disobeyed, the protector threatened to stretch her face like cheese and wrap it around a pole. She got freaked out but immediately started making excuses, saying she just wanted to know what time it was, and left. Besides, Choo Choo always brought Sienna food for no reason and urged her to eat, saying she still needed to grow. She mostly got the princess sweets, explaining that they were way sweeter and tastier than crusty bread. At the same time, Choo Choo hated the prince for leaving the little girl without a family and thought he was a total scumbag. The maid wished all sorts of bad things on him, though mostly it sounded childish. But she said it with all her heart. Sienna even felt a little sorry for the crown prince, who she hated, but it was also nice to have someone on her side. Anyway, since he's in such a high position, he probably hears people bad-mouthing him a bunch of times every day. At that moment, Rashid received a letter from Baroness Appleton, and Saul asked him what was wrong, noticing the prince scratching himself, but he just explained that his ear was itchy, and even remembered the superstition that someone was scolding him. At that very moment, Saul shot that down, saying if that were true, the prince would have been rolling around on the floor for years, scratching his ears raw. Then he noticed a chipmunk munching on an apple, and remarked that it must taste pretty good. Rashid agreed, saying the Appletons had the best apples, and the guard pointed out those farmers never got an invite to the palace to be thanked. Then he suggested the emperor throw a reception, plus he could use it as an excuse to check out Sienna. The prince liked that idea and decided to reward the guard by letting him play with his adorable pets for half a day. Saul still refused, and Rashid declared he just didn't understand how cute his little darlings were. Then he read a letter and shared with the guard that the Baroness would also be happy to join the tea party. The maids went through all kinds of training because the imperial family's status couldn't be lowered by a servant's mistake. At the same time, they had to clean up the uneven lawn and arrange the tables based on the number of guests. On top of everything, Sienna added hydrangeas she'd cut that morning, so it wouldn't look too monotonous. After that, she decided to enjoy the view for a bit, and Choo Choo filled her in on the gossip. She confessed that it wasn't just farmers coming to the tea party, but also Baroness Appleton, the owner of the orchard. Now, Sienna understood why everyone was so hyped up. Besides the guests, they wanted to impress the Baroness. The girls also noticed Jean looked extra gorgeous today, even switched up her jewelry and makeup. Choo Choo thought it looked kind of trashy, and Sienna doubted that would impress the Baroness. Her friend guessed it was because this was Jean's first guest, then admitted she dolled herself up a little too. She was also worried about everything going smoothly, but Sienna told her not to sweat it. Since she taught her to be a maid for a reason, there wasn't much time left before the doors opened, and the guests arrived. The maids braced themselves to greet them. The guests were surprised that this was the imperial palace. One of them even wore her best dress. After the greetings, the maid trainees led the guests to the table, but Jean remained standing still. The other girls couldn't figure out why she was being so extra, but they had a hunch she was trying to score points with the Baroness. Even while serving, the place reeked of high society, and the guests were already gossiping about the maids. Still, the banquet couldn't start until everyone arrived, and the Baroness herself showed up last. The trainees were stoked when they saw her, especially Jean, because the Baroness was seriously gorgeous. A maid instantly rushed over, giving her the VIP treatment and thanking her for gracing them with her presence. Jenny's face went totally psycho for a split second from the nerves, and she knew that anyone who saw it would bolt. She managed to keep it together though, and asked the madam to follow her, then led her to her reserve spot. Sienna caught a whiff of a sweet, expensive rose scent coming from Appleton, even though she thought they were just some backwater nobles. The ex-princess also noticed that this woman was seriously stunning. She'd always wondered what the Baroness looked like, and now she was even a little jealous of Jean. The other guests noticed another arrival, but Sienna couldn't quite make out who it was yet. But she soon saw a hunched-over old woman approaching, so hideous that nobody wanted to serve her. The banquet still hadn't started, waiting for the last guest, so Sienna went over and greeted the old woman. The girl understood that no guest could be ignored, and then offered to escort her to a table. Each table seated 3 or 4 guests, and they were served by a single maid. And after all the guests were seated, it was announced that the imperial banquet could now begin. The guests chatted about being in the imperial palace. Even though it seemed like a normal tea party, they even admitted thinking they'd spend their lives picking apples and never experienced this kind of luxury. Sienna overheard their conversation and realized they were just talking about everyday stuff. There was no talk of state affairs, which made the atmosphere pretty chill. But the ex-princess was all about service and soon presented the guests with their dessert for the day. Popping the lid, she explained it was chocolate made from Kona cocoa and suggested they just eat it and savor the flavor. The ladies were surprised they were being served chocolate, usually reserved for royalty. Apparently, it's so sweet. Even the prince himself would stop complaining once he tasted it. Then, the women started chatting about the dessert, each popping a piece into their mouths. Immediately, a pleasant wave of sweetness washed over them, and they realized it was unbelievably delicious. The chocolate just melted in their mouths. And they started worrying that the sweetness was disappearing so fast. Sienna knew that for first timers trying chocolate, that kind of reaction was totally normal. The ex-princess also noticed that the old woman had quickly finished her dessert and was now just wiping the remnants from around her mouth. Then a maid approached her and offered a napkin, understanding she was uncomfortable because she'd also gotten it all over her hands. The girl offered to get her something else, but she just turned away, refusing. Then the other guests remembered they had handkerchiefs too and started offering them up. They also figured that the maids, used to serving noble ladies, must feel awkward waiting on the likes of them. But Sienna explained everything was fine, that they were all her honored guests, and then asked them to enjoy the tea party. After that, the girl offered to pour the ladies some Ingrid's Earl Grey, hoping they'd like it. But she also added that if they preferred something else, they should feel free to let her know. The guests agreed and were soon tasting the delicious tea, realizing it was the kind the royal family drank. Then one of the ladies couldn't quite put her finger on what made this tea different from what she drank at home. And the old woman explained that to really understand the taste of food or drink, you had to take small bites or sips. The ladies also understood that the Baroness was the only one who knew that, but also knew that she was the guest of honor today. So Sienna figured not everyone knew the Baroness and decided to clarify. And they explained Appleton Namjik had recently gotten married. One lady added that she definitely hadn't been on the farm before, because she'd never seen her. But she'd heard the Baron fell head over heels for her at first sight, since she really is gorgeous. Now Sienna understood Jean was gonna have to listen closely to this guest and not screw things up. Cause if she pisses her off, the whole party is gonna be ruined. And that old grump was just stoked to finally have the most important guest in front of her. Jean was a merchant's daughter and believed it was her duty to serve someone like the Baroness. Then she offered Appleton chocolate from the Imperial Palace, explaining it was top-tier stuff and worth a try. But the Baroness just kept sitting there, eyeing the dessert, and then asked how long the maid was planning to ignore her. Appleton also added that Jeannie's snooty greeting and the look she was giving her felt like she was being covered in dirt. She was even putting up with the sight of the dessert, and then she declared the maid had poured her tea terribly. After that, the Baroness wanted to know how long she had to put up with such rudeness, and Jean just offered to pour her more tea. The maid was sure she hadn't messed anything up. She'd trained with a noble family, and the other maids always complimented her. The Baroness also pointed out that the maids at the Imperial Palace were usually top-notch, but something still felt off. Then she remembered that maids who screwed up got seriously punished. Appleton added that they'd get locked in cages or flogged, and if they messed up again, they'd lose a limb. Then she asked Jean what kind of punishment she thought she deserved, and the poor girl was just shaking with fear. Sienna jumped in, explaining that their skills were still pretty basic and Jean wasn't ready to be serving such high-ranking guests. Then the former princess started begging the Baroness to forgive the maid for her mistake. But the Baroness snapped back that, if all it took was a bow and an apology, their world would be ridiculously simple. Appleton didn't see why she should give the maid a second chance, especially since the royal family was throwing this banquet. Sienna explained that if this party got ruined because of one measly maid, the king would be seriously pissed. She was hoping the Baroness wouldn't want that, but for some reason, the Baroness took her words as a threat. The former princess swore she wouldn't act like that and explained they were just requests to make the guest comfortable. After thinking it over, the Baroness agreed to be served by Sienna, but declared that if she wasn't satisfied, all her rage would be unleashed on her. The maid agreed, but then she saw her stepmother's face again. The one where she actually complimented her tea. This was a zero mistake situation. It stole part of her life, and she'd never be able to forget that time. Now pouring tea for the Baroness, she explained its origin again, hoping she wouldn't mind trying this particular blend. The Baroness watched the maid's every move and noticed that her manners were impeccable. Sienna knew the most important part of tea was the leaves and the ratio of boiling water to those leaves. The mistake was in how the tea was brewed and served, which made the taste bitter and the aroma weak. You couldn't screw this up. And the amount of hot water couldn't be way more than the tea, or it'd taste wrong. Also, to pour tea right, you gotta lift the kettle high. Let it hit the air. That's how the aroma spreads quicker. You gotta watch how the tea doesn't spill outside the cup. Then slowly hand the cup to your guest. Sienna was dead certain she nailed the tea to water ratio, and told the Baroness to speak up if anything was off. She knew she brewed it perfectly, picking the best leaves. But if the guest didn't like it, she was screwed, frozen. Waiting for a reaction? Sienna even held her breath. But then Appleton announced that the tea was delicious. The former princess celebrated silently, glad she pulled it off, and then decided to take her leave. She just asked her guest to call her if she needed anything at all. Soon, the tea party and that chill vibe came to an end. And after that, the guests started heading out little by little. Sienna went up to the lady she'd been serving earlier and apologized for having to leave her, but she assured me everything was cool. 'Cause if the Baroness had gotten pissed, things would have been way worse. And she admitted she was scared too. The Madame also said that thanks to Sienna's work, they totally enjoyed the banquet. And then she thanked her. The girl was just glad this guest understood their situation and told her to be careful before she left. Then that old lady came up to Sienna, and the maid figured she was about to say something to her. She started hesitantly, saying she'd been thinking a lot, and admitted she'd been sure she'd be treated like crap in the Imperial Palace. She also said she was scared at first, but swore she got lucky with Sienna. And that's when she found her courage. The girl, all happy again, repeated that the amount of boiling water shouldn't be more than the tea, or the flavor changes. Then, the old lady admitted she'd had the most amazing chocolate tea and just had a blast talking. Sienna remembered that for ages, maids aren't supposed to show too much emotion. Just be polite to everyone. Even though she was super happy it all worked out, she had no clue what to do next. Still, she cracked a smile and thanked the old lady for introducing her to such amazing people. The Baroness watched from a short distance as Sienna said goodbye to the old woman. After the banquet itself, the maids started cleaning up, basically dedicating their entire day to serving the guests. This life was supposed to be for maids, but in reality, it was more like training for maids. Their work wraps up super late, and by the end of the day, Lip knew she was beat and needed to crash. But it wasn't all bad since they got to enjoy the leftovers from the feast. Sienna was polishing off some bitter cocoa with fancy butter. But Choo-Choo passed, saying she'd lose muscle mass. The princess even felt sorry for her, thinking things must be tough. But the maid had no clue why she kept staring. Choo-Choo admitted she never expected things to turn out this way when she started working. Remembering a lady who offered to take her in, the guest figured she'd be useful on the farm. After checking out her massive triceps, Sienna still couldn't figure out why she refused to work on the farm. And the other girl explained that's what the other maids wanted for her. Right then, the other maids came over, showering the princess with praise for handling the Baroness so well. Then they started begging the girl to teach them how to make tea that perfectly, even arguing over who'd get to learn first. But then Jean yelled, "Have you all lost your minds?" Serenia, reminding them that she was the best tea maker. The redhead maid couldn't believe the others were ignoring her. Now, deciding they had no pride, the girls were surprised, thinking she should be feeling ashamed right now. And that's probably why she'd been silent. They also started scolding her, saying the banquet almost fell apart because of her, and thanked Sienna for fixing everything. They also explained that otherwise, They all could have been punished and Jean herself could have been fired. Now they were blasting her, saying that instead of apologizing, she's saying stuff like that and told her to think straight. Jean immediately blew up, declaring she didn't understand how anyone could even talk to people like them. Meanwhile, Sienna remembered the Baroness was a cut above the other guests. Even her posture screamed elegance. The girl noticed more than just her posture. Even her gestures during tea showed she was born aristocracy. Sienna also really liked this lady, but not because she was a baroness. The girl sensed something special about her late that night. Saw the guard standing at the emperor's bedroom door, noticed someone approaching. He recognized the baroness, but explained that if she entered the room dressed like that, it would cause trouble. But Appleton, with her rigid adherence to etiquette, confessed that she still couldn't forget that maid. The guard just asked her to forget it, assuring her that no one was planning anything shady. Then, noticing her look, Saul started apologizing, clarifying that he didn't mean it like that at all. But she just smiled, thinking he was being funny, and explained that it wouldn't be funny at all. The Baroness also couldn't understand what kind of soldiers they were turning into and hoped to see him begging for forgiveness. Then, walking into the Emperor's room, Appleton saw all sorts of critters and birds waiting, there to greet her. The Baroness didn't care how it looked. She just really liked them. Then a little bird flew over and landed on her hand. Just then, Saul called her Your Majesty and explained that he already had a bath prepared. Rashid decided to change his appearance for half a day, using a magic stone that cost a fortune to do it. Once the emperor was settled in the bath, the guard asked how the meeting went and if the maids handled their duties. He admitted that it went pretty well and that the one who was recently a princess managed to learn all the etiquette. Still, Rashid was bothered by how she held the teapot and that she didn't look him directly in the eye, even though he thought it was wonderful. And everything was done exactly as it was, written in the maid's etiquette manual. The emperor found this girl pretty interesting, and the guard couldn't understand why he was even thinking like that. Saul knew that he usually hated stuff like that, and now he didn't understand what was up with His Majesty. A lot of people noticed the emperor started being kinder, more approachable, and the girls even had the nerve to ask what his type was. Rashid couldn't give a straight answer. Just mumbled something about liking cute girls who win you over with their smiles. His Majesty's changed so much. It's almost weird the way he looks at his people now. The guard also figured the princess had settled in, and maybe being a maid was her calling. Saul also noticed the emperor only ever talked about her, never about getting married and having an heir. The guard started to suspect His Majesty planned to make this girl more than just a personal servant. Then he reminded Rashid that Sienna was from the country he conquered, and if he was planning anything shady, it would end in disaster. He explained he was just testing her abilities, then confessed that he thought she looked stunning. Meanwhile, the princess found a rip in her apron and decided to fix it real quick. Since she'd been doing embroidery since she was 5, while the maids were gawking at how fast she did it, Lip walked in and announced that Sienna had a visitor. The teacher said Baroness Appleton wanted to explain something to her. That's why she was here. The girl was confused. The tea party had gone well. She figured she must have screwed something up on the way. She ran through a million scenarios in her head but couldn't figure out where she went wrong. Then she walked into the hall, and the Baroness immediately apologized for showing up unannounced. But then she stood up, and Sienna was shocked to see it wasn't the Baroness, but that old lady. She then apologized to the maid and decided to introduce herself, explaining that she was Magdalena Appleton. The old woman also stated that Sienna had made a good impression at the tea party, then greeted her again. This all caught her totally off guard, so she decided to hand the maid the basket of apples. She also asked the girl to give her a little time, and now Sienna realized that this was the real Baroness Appleton. Now the princess was even more shocked and didn't understand who that other woman was, even though she hadn't said she was the Baroness. Sienna instantly started apologizing to the old woman for not understanding and making a mistake that offended her honor and dignity. The girl was so ashamed in that moment, and she kept begging forgiveness for her behavior. But the old woman just laughed and then explained that she had hidden her identity willingly. She explained that the tea banquet at the Imperial Palace was an opportunity she might never get again. The Baroness understood that she needed to go, but her appearance wasn't as good as it used to be, and she was afraid people wouldn't treat her with respect when they saw her like this. So it was better not to show up. Appleton understood that if she went to this celebration, everyone there would be talking about her, everyone would judge her, and ask how the Baroness could become so hideous. The old woman confessed that even in her own garden, she often heard similar taunts, and it was hard on her. Then she got another letter offering to hide the fact that she was actually the Baroness. That's when Magdalena wondered if she should go, knowing this was her last shot at getting out. The old woman also knew that if she didn't reveal who she was, nobody would give a damn about her. But then she saw Sienna, who greeted her super politely and invited her to a table. The Baroness noticed that even without makeup, that outfit couldn't hide the girl's class. Appleton was blown away that day. Sienna's grace and politeness really impressed her, and she wanted to be just like that. After tea, the old woman started studying etiquette and even practiced in front of the mirror, figuring out how to thank the girl for a nice time. Also, Marcelina really wanted to treat the maid to some stuff from her farm, cause she was seriously grateful for that day. The princess couldn't believe the actual Baroness came to thank a maid. She noticed the position of her hands, the angle of her bow, and the way her dress fell. Every move screamed nobility. Even though it was just a greeting, Margaretine Appleton was showing everyone the kind of person she was. The old lady remembered Sienna telling her not to worry about a thing and just enjoy herself. And the princess realized this was someone who lived surrounded by love, because only love can do all that. Then she bowed before the Baroness, insisting she didn't deserve such praise. The girl didn't know if she could accept it with grace, but she had no choice but to take her gift, holding the basket of apples high. Sienna declared she'd always remember the fruit the Baroness gave her. Then she shared the apples with the other maids, and one started wondering why Snow White ate a poisoned apple. But another said she'd eat it even if it was poisoned, 'cause they're so sweet, and asked for another one. The maids, who toiled every day and ate black bread, they were overjoyed that the Baroness had given them honey apples. As they ate the fruit, they now considered her a goddess, shouting how much they loved this woman. Now Sienna herself decided to try the apples, and noticed they really were delicious. But now she couldn't shake the question of who that woman was. The one everyone mistook for the Baroness. To Sienna, she looked like a prince with the same hair and violet eyes. For a second, she thought it was the princess checking up on the new maids. Just then, the instructor walked in, told them to stop eating, and announced that Shane was now a full-time maid. The princess was so shocked. She dropped the apple she was holding because she definitely wasn't expecting that. Jeannie immediately started yelling that it couldn't be true, that it was complete nonsense, and that nobody understood the decision. She demanded the instructor explain everything, who then reminded them about the tea party a few days ago. Then she clarified that it was actually a test of the students' abilities and stated that there was no question who did the best. After that, Lip declared the topic closed and ordered Sienna to be at the Ruby Castle at dawn. The instructor explained that the girl would now be serving Princess Eris and then left. Sienna was blown away. Asterisk, asterisk, all the other girls wanted to be headmaids. But she showed up last and got picked first. The ex-princess just wanted to blend in, and now all the other maids are gonna hate her guts. She knew she'd have to get used to this kind of treatment, and that really bummed her out. But then she heard her friends congratulating her, saying she was finally free. Some even admitted they were jealous but still happy for her. And Sienna realized she was just being a downer for no reason. Still, she was a little bummed. But if she hadn't stepped in, the tea party would have been a total disaster. The girls also confessed that even though they wanted to be headmaids, they weren't about to turn into jealous jerks. Besides, she hooked them up with those amazing apples. And then Sienna thanked them for their support. She saw completely different people in them, nothing like the snakes she knew back in the kingdom, and promised to bring them treats with her first paycheck. And of course, Jean just had to chime in with her complaints. insulting the other maids while she was at it. She was saying they were totally nuts. That it was weird Sienna, with her shady background, got promoted so fast. But Choo Choo stepped up, told Red that she was full of crap, and Red felt her whole body start to tremble. Still, she had enough guts left to threaten to tell her daddy everything about the others, then she stormed out. And even though the girls thought her behavior was awful, they were happy because now they'd get more apples. Jean yelled at everyone. But the maids quickly forgot about it with the tasty food and the chara. Sienna was glad she didn't have much luggage. Even though she never expected to be going anywhere from here. But starting tomorrow, she'd be the head maid of the Imperial Palace. And honestly, that's better than being a princess. She was thinking that even though she was super tired, it was a good job. And then someone knocked. It was Choo Choo. And Sienna figured something was up. But she explained that nothing bad had happened. Then the muscular maid handed the former princess a hairpin. Explaining that she wanted to give her a gift for her promotion, she also explained she grabbed it last minute cause she was short on time but hoped I'd dig it. Choo Choo also said maids are allowed to doll up a bit and told me not to think she was any less than anyone else. Sienna knew the junior maids barely made anything. And this girl bought her a gift, blowing her savings, noticing her friend's pensive look. Choo Choo guessed she didn't like the present. Then she said she asked them to pick the prettiest one. But that's when Sienna jumped on her with a hug. Then the ex-princess thanked her, saying it was an awesome gift and she totally loved it. Around Choo Choo, Sienna always felt warmth and knew she'd miss her, but believed everything would be all right. In the morning, Lip asked one of the maids if Princess Grace had her own personal maid. The girl said that was her and explained she asked to be transferred here cause it was unbearable there. She knew it seemed crazy to outsiders, but only those who'd been there knew what was messed up about that job. The maid was all, I'd rather scrub floors and run errands. And figured no maid on earth could ever please that princess. She remembered how awful it was in that palace and swore there wasn't a single person in the whole empire who could handle it. A little later, Sienna finished getting ready, believing her future would be way better than when she was a princess, and prepared to leave. Right before she left, that same maid popped in and said she hated to break it to her, but that job was going to be a nightmare. She explained that all the previous maids had bailed and she dipped the second she got the chance. Sienna guessed it must have been super tough doing it alone, and the maid agreed, especially keeping an eye on the princess. She also added that Princess Iris wasn't just picky. Everyone in the palace thought she was straight up the devil in disguise. There was this amazing palace with a small garden, which the emperor gave to Rosemary, a dancer he fell for at first sight. That was the Ruby Palace, and now the princess she birthed lives there. The seventh princess of the empire. Then the maid led Sienna to that palace, which looked pretty gloomy from the outside. As she went inside, the maid decided to gently call the princess, but there was no response. So they continued down the hallway, and the servant knocked on the bedroom door, announcing the new maid had arrived. Sienna was still hoping this princess had just been branded a mudblood or something. But as soon as they stepped inside, a gigantic spider with hairy legs appeared right in front of them. The maid who worked there before instantly screamed hysterically from fright and then started feeling sick. Then, Aris came out and Sienna thought it was unreal. How she could be so energetic in this situation. The princess was holding the spider on a string and asked why the newbie hadn't reacted. Sienna immediately apologized and said she'd be happy to fake whatever reaction the princess wanted to see. Then Sienna grabbed her head and screamed at the top of her lungs, like she was totally freaked out by something. After that, she asked permission to introduce herself, and when the princess gave the okay, she greeted her properly. Eris couldn't help but notice the new maid wasn't scared at all, and couldn't believe her prank hadn't worked. Tossing the spider aside, the princess told them to get lost, saying she was sick of all the maids. Sienna wasn't sure what just happened, but then that maid started talking to her like nothing fazed her. She started thanking her, saying there was never a chance to leave before, since there wasn't a suitable maid. But Sienna still asked what she was supposed to do here, and found out she just had to watch the princess, and the rest was up to her. The maid explained that there's no one else around anyway, except for her and that weird little girl. The girl knew that all the work was now on her, but since she came, she had to get to it. She decided to start with cleaning and realized that no one had tidied up in ages. Everything was getting cleaned up right before her eyes. And soon Sienna saw that it wasn't so gloomy after all. Just then, the princess came to her and declared that everything she was doing was pointless, and she didn't care about cleanliness. So, Sienna turned to the little girl and asked what business she had with her. But Iris was pissed that she was being treated like a real princess again. Like nobody could treat her that way. Then, she demanded the newbie stop acting all nice, and then declared that she'd be ditching this place the first chance she got. Meanwhile, Sul was asking the emperor why Sienna had been sent to the Ruby Palace, while he thought it was better to do things methodically, not just on a whim of His Majesty. Rashid chimed in that the girl could be invited to his palace too, and the guard promised to pass the order to the maid. The emperor repeated that he could bring Sienna here right now, without even giving her a chance to think about it, as he remembered seeing her at the banquet, especially how sweetly she said goodbye to the real Baroness. Rashid thought the girl was really sweet, especially when she smiled, and hoped they would see each other soon. Even though the Ruby Palace was far, Sienna, meanwhile, was explaining to the princess that it was a secret and asked her to explain where she'd heard it. She told the kid she just worked there, but if she found a better gig, she'd bounce for sure. But for now, she was sticking around and would do everything she could to take care of the princess. Later, she tucked Iris into bed and in the morning brought her food, but the kid refused, saying the milk and veggies tasted like poison. Then the princess demanded cookies, but Sienna explained that snacking instead of eating a real meal was bad for you. She also said that if she didn't eat right, she'd get sick all the time. And it was super important for a princess to be healthy. That's when Iris declared she was old enough to know better. But the maid pointed out that she was skin and bones. The girl knew that no matter how difficult Iris was, it wasn't right that nobody could be bothered to look after her. The princess also claimed the maid was lying cause she was already 10. But the maid swore it was true. Then she repeated again that if she kept this up, she was gonna have some serious health problems. After that, she promised the princess some sweets if she finished her whole breakfast. After breakfast, Iris didn't want to brush her teeth either. So Sienna threatened to skip her sweets tomorrow. The next day, the maid opened the window and saw it was an awesome morning. The sun practically begging to come inside. But the princess was still lounging in bed, all bundled up in the blanket, and even decided to ditch breakfast. Sienna finally managed to drag her up, but then Aras saw the food and demanded something decent to eat. The maid explained that this was decent food, and that she herself had also eaten a cream bun and some fried chicken. Aras just started yelling again now, because the maid had eaten everything. But she pointed out she was just following royal family rules. She also added that after mealtime was over, any food that was left over was for the servants. Now, Sienna felt pretty full, and she'd also found a way to get the picky kid to eat. If you make a kid hungry enough, they'll eat anything. And the maid was just scarfing down all her food. The girl remembered being locked in a room for days without food. And now she was executing her plan perfectly. The whole point of this plan was also to find out the princess's favorite food. And she ended up scarfing down the whole salad. But Eris claimed she just decided not to leave anything for the servants, remembering they get leftovers after the master eats. So the kid decided to leave the maid hungry. But Sienna just praised her for doing such a good job. At the same time, the maid stroked Eris's hair, pretending to apologize for her rude behavior. She just asked her to leave again, but then noticed something in her hair and tried to pull it out. Sienna, meanwhile, was happy that the food situation was resolved, and it was time to take care of cleanliness. She invited the princess to take a bath, but she started screaming that she hated water, bubbles, and the scratchy brush. Then the maid explained that if she didn't wash, cockroaches would come because they like everything dirty. She added that these cockroaches eat skin and hair, and they even poop in it sometimes. But Eris screamed that it was a lie. The princess declared that she hadn't seen any cockroaches the whole time. And then the maid pointed out that the girl's head was itching. She told the kid to listen for the scurrying, explained it was roaches munching on stuff. The princess freaked out, thought bugs would eat her, and demanded the maid wash her up right then. At first, the loofah felt rough, but the longer she scrubbed, the better it felt. Then some foam got in her eyes. But Eris didn't feel any sting. She just liked the rosemary smell. Sienna used the same trick to get her to brush her teeth, saying roaches eat teeth with food stuck on them. Soon, Eris said this maid was driving her nuts, complaining she was exhausted and had no energy left. Sienna just praised the princess for doing a good job and told her she needed a good night's sleep to recharge. But then Eris started yelling that she'd been bugging her all day and didn't want her bothering her in her sleep too. The princess declared she sleeps when she wants, and the maid admitted she just wanted her to fall asleep quickly. Sienna also confessed she knew an interesting story. But if the princess wasn't interested, she'd just leave. But Eris stopped her and asked her to tell her a story. And the maid agreed. Sienna began. Once upon a time, there lived a diamond princess who loved precious gems more than anything. She collected them from everywhere. And then one day, she decided to cover her entire body with them, making her shine brighter than the sun. But then she heard news that the dragon, who lived in the west, had the most beautiful diamond in the world. The princess desired it so much that she ventured through thorn bushes and swamps all by herself. When she arrived at the castle, the dragon saw how beautiful she was and offered her marriage in exchange for the diamond. Just then, Sienna noticed Eris starting to yawn, and a few moments later, she was fast asleep. Wishing the girl sweet dreams, the maid kissed her and promised herself that she would make sure she grew up the healthiest she could be. The girl understood that this was the duty of Princess Eris's personal maid. A lot had changed since Sienna arrived at this palace, but the girl was starting to act up again. The princess cut across the flower bed too, but the maid was all, "Hey, no running. I just planted those. The seeds will get hurt." Iris asked what kind of flowers they were, and the maid just rattled off a bunch of names. She went on about how the light's perfect here. The soil's rich, and if you water 'em right, they'll bloom like crazy. Then the maid promised once the buds open up, she'd make the princess an awesome flower crown. The whole time, the kid's just thinking, why does Sienna always treat her like she's the only princess in the world? Eris was like, what's this maid's deal? She figured the maid was definitely holding something back, keeping secrets. The princess wanted to know what she was really after, but then she noticed the maid just giving her this sweet smile. Then Iris spotted a hairpin on the floor, asterisk, asterisk, and popped it right in her hair. And when Sienna saw it, her face went totally stone cold. That was the hairpin Choo-Choo gave her. And no matter how swamped she was, she couldn't afford to lose it. So she walked over to the princess and, all apologetic, explained that the hairpin was actually hers. The girl also explained that she must have dropped it while tending the flower bed and then asked for it back. But the little brat wasn't about to hand it over easily and said if she wanted it back, she'd have to try and take it. Then Aris took off, confident that the maid would never catch her. Nobody ever had, but soon, the girl saw the maid was almost on top of her and couldn't figure out how she was so fast. They ended up by the fountain, and when they stopped, Sienna explained that snatching stuff and running wasn't cool. Then she demanded the girl give the hairpin back, and Eris, just bummed out, figured that everything she'd said was just empty promises. The girl got all upset that Sienna had promised to take care of her, and now she just chucked the hairpin in the water. She remembered one of the maids coming up to the princess and hugging her, promising that as her servant, she'd do anything Eris told her to. The girl thanked her and instantly felt all warm and fuzzy, like her mom was right there with her again. And then that maid got arrested, accused of stealing stuff from the palace and selling it, and she'd have to answer for it in court. They were dragging the maid away, and she kept begging the princess for help, but all she said was, "It's an order." The next maid packed her stuff real quick too, and straight up told the princess she wasn't a princess. Not without her mom. She was nobody. even with that messed up family history. She never thought she was completely useless, but even her nanny bailed cause she was too picky. Now, Sienna was in front of her, supposed to be serving her too, and that's when the girl woke up. She knew it was just a bad dream. But the truth was, everyone leaves her, and when she didn't see Sienna, she figured she was gone too. Eris figured she'd packed up her stuff last night and left. So she wanted to know in advance if she'd be abandoned so it wouldn't hurt so bad. Just then, the maid walked in, reciting some goofy poem, and noticed the princess was up super early, but seeing the weird look on the girl's face, she knew she'd had a nightmare and told her she could go back to sleep. Sienna also explained to the kid that when you're sleepy, you don't feel hungry. So your digestion just shuts down. But Eris just couldn't believe they hadn't abandoned her. Not even after everything that happened. The princess immediately ran to hug her and then confessed that she really hadn't wanted to do what she did. The little girl also apologized and begged the maid not to hate her for throwing away the hairpin. Sienna assured her that everything was okay. But Eris still couldn't believe it. And the maid explained that little kids sometimes do things like that. At the same time, the girl admitted that she was happy. The princess had sincerely apologized. The girl also confessed that she knew how unpleasant the palace was for Sienna, because there were so many chores and she was all alone. And then, she suddenly promised the maid that she would help her with everything, and also obey her and share her candy. Eris was ready to do anything just so this maid wouldn't leave her. And Sienna agreed to help her grow into a worthy princess. From that day on, the princess really changed a lot and helped out, watering the flower beds or trying to clean the rooms. The girl was worried that it would be hard for the little one, but she didn't give up. And she was actually doing pretty well. Sienna kept trying to get through to her that kids have more important stuff to do than cleaning and laundry. The maid clarified to the princess that she meant studying, and the kid even got upset. But Sienna reminded her about promising to be a good girl. The servant explained to the girl that she didn't have to know hard subjects yet, but her handwriting had to be perfect. Then she went to grab a pen and paper. But when she opened the drawer, she noticed the stuff she needed wasn't there. The maid promised she'd find what she needed real quick and be right back. Then she asked a clerk to give her some pens and paper, but he refused, saying he couldn't just hand that stuff out to anyone. Sienna explained it was for the princess's lessons, but he'd had maids try to pull that for the princess card before. He also told her that if she needed anything, she had to get permission from the emperor himself. The girl knew no one would give her permission, and she almost lost it. And that's when Eris asked if she should tell Rashid's brother. It was only then that Sienna remembered the crown prince, and then she wondered if they were close. The princess said he got along great with her mom, but wasn't sure if it'd be the same with her. The maid figured if Rashid got curious, he'd bite for sure. So they had to give it a shot. Then she suggested the princess write him a letter. And before you know it, he shows up asking how they're doing. Eris was also clueless about why he was there, saying all he had to do was send confirmation. Rashid explained he got the letter that his little sister needed help. So he decided to deliver the confirmation himself. He also pointed out that when you have guests, you greet them and offer them a cup of tea first. The maid immediately apologized, saying there wouldn't be any tea since they were out of tea leaves. But the prince told her not to sweat it, saying he brought everything and telling her the brand, asked her to make it. Sienna never imagined she'd meet the emperor in the imperial palace like this. Plus, she noticed Rashid was staring at her, and she wondered if he even remembered her after Cain. She also noticed how he held the teacup, and those movements seemed really familiar. The princess loved the tea, saying she'd never tasted anything like it and complimented that it wasn't even hot. The girl explained it was because of the prince's tea leaves, but he said the princess's tea was delicious too. At that moment, the girl thought the emperor remembered her, and the little princess also felt like they knew each other. Rashid was surprised Shian hadn't mentioned him, then admitted he'd hired this girl as a maid and sent her here. Eris started asking why he did that, and her brother explained that he thought this maid was a cutie. Just then, a guard approached the emperor and reminded him about the upcoming royal visit. So they needed to leave. Rashid was bummed he didn't even finish his tea. But Saul pointed out he'd emptied the cup. looking surprised. Then the prince handed his sister a document, and she asked how she should pay him. But he insisted the cup of tea was enough. Afterwards, His Majesty thanked the maid for brewing the delicious tea, and she in turn thanked him. That's when Ares told her brother to back off someone else's maid, and demanded he get lost. The prince finally admitted he tried to be less pushy. And after he left, Sienna realized just how close the sisters were, but the little princess shot back, saying their relationship was actually awful. The maid also noticed the princess had a good talk with her brother after getting that document, but she claimed it was just a small deal. The girl also explained that even though her brother agreed, he put her in major debt since they're competing for the throne. Sienna had previously thought the crown prince was the sole heir to the empire. But a lot had changed. This also meant the power struggle between brother and sister was still on. Ares was feeling pretty good right now, even though she has no family or mother to support her. The girl also confessed she didn't want this fate for herself. But at the same time, she's glad she can take on this challenge from destiny. Now Sienna understood she was wrong when she initially thought the brother and sister got along well. If they actually care about each other, she wouldn't treat the princess's feelings like they're nothing. Sienna knew being a princess sucks in every royal family. And you gotta ditch your childhood to be throne worthy. She wondered how she could handle that weight all alone. And then Ares asked if she wanted more tea. The maid was also thinking back to when all she wanted was a simple life in this crazy world. Meanwhile, Sol was grilling the prince about whether he was into Sienna. And he said her big eyes made her look like a squirrel. Then His Majesty started thinking about snatching the maid for himself and asked if the guard had noticed any changes around the palace. He admitted it was noticeably cleaner, and he'd seen Princess Ares looking way better than before. 2. They both agreed the maid was doing a good job. And then the prince shoved Sol cause he was being a drag. Rashid also said he was stoked Ares finally opened up to Sienna, and that she doesn't judge people based on their title or power. He also pointed out the maid is down to earth and good at connecting with people. Even though that's not enough to earn real trust, then His Majesty remembered how his sister, when she was still in the womb, was just as restless. Rosemary even let him touch her stomach, and he could see for himself how much that kid kicked. Rashid then added that everything that was cute stayed in Ares, while admitting that he liked the tea Sienna brewed. Meanwhile, the maid asked the princess if His Majesty would be visiting them often now, but she didn't know. After a while, Sienna ran into Choo-Choo near the warehouse, and the girls were really happy to see each other. The strong girl noticed that her friend had gotten a little pale, and she in turn noticed that Choo-Choo had gotten bigger. She confessed that she was training a lot now to bulk up her body, and then asked how Sienna was doing. The girl adjusted the gifted hairpin, which she had again, and told her a little about herself. Recently, the emperor visited her and Ares again. Deciding to just drop by on his way, he also brought them a cake with lots of filling and chocolate, declaring that it was for the princess. After that, he asked Sienna to take care of him today, and the girl couldn't disobey his order. While she was brewing some delicious tea, Ares decided to wait so she could have the cake with it. When everything was ready, the princess noticed the dessert was super tasty, and she thanked her brother. Then the little kid declared that it was unfair to pay for her testimony with just 2 cups of tea. So she asked her brother to grant her another request, explaining that she'd recently dropped a maid's hairpin in the water. His Majesty understood what his sister wanted and promised he'd do it for her, and Sienna, overhearing, was actually a little surprised. Soon, the servants drained the fountain so the bottom was visible, and then they started looking for the lost item. Choo-Choo couldn't believe that 100 soldiers were working on this, but Sienna assured her that was exactly what was happening. And even before that, the maid had received another confirmation from the prince because she needed to sew some new clothes for Ares. She needed high-quality fabrics for this. And when the storekeeper saw the prince's seal on the letter, he was totally shocked, so she pulled it off because she knew maids needed serious endurance, and she buckled down and got it done that night when Sienna was hauling the fabrics back. She thought someone was pushing from behind, giving her a hand. But when she turned around, she saw Emperor Rashid standing there with a genuine smile on his face. She immediately apologized and greeted him, not realizing it was him. and he asked why there were so many things on the cart. His Majesty then asked the maid to look up and explained he just wanted to help. But she didn't understand why. Rashid then explained again that she was so small and the cart was so big. So he just figured he'd lend a hand. After telling her friend all this, Sienna decided to say goodbye, worried the princess would start looking for her. But then Choo-Choo confessed her suspicions that the crown prince has some kind of mental issues and is definitely nuts. She added that a low-ranking maid's life is worse than a fly's, and no matter what, they're just slave labor. Choo-Choo also admitted she's worried, because Rashid might lose it around Sienna, and she should get a job at the Ruby Palace too. But the ex-princess figured, talented as her friend was, there was no way they'd send her there. Even if she could become an official maid. As the girls were saying goodbye, Aris walked up and was like, "What's taking Sienna so long? I'm starving." The maid reported that she'd made the princess a snack before leaving. And Aris explained she'd already inhaled those 10 cookies. Then, the little brat grabbed the maid's hand and begged her to come back cause she was seriously hungry. As she left, Aris gave Choo-Choo a nasty look. So Sienna didn't think they'd send another maid to the Ruby Palace. Back at the palace, the princess guessed that the maid liked this Choo-Choo so much because she was big and buff. The girl explained that she was one of the students and added that she liked her because she was super kind and helpful. Sienna also confirmed that Choo-Choo was seriously strong and could carry like multiple sacks on just one arm. After that, the princess asked the maid to make meat and milk today, declaring that she wasn't a kid anymore and it was time to change her diet. The girl remarked that the little brat was kind of cute when she was mad. But then she heard a familiar voice behind her again. The emperor and his lackey strolled up, and the princess immediately wanted to know what brought him back. Again, Rashid said he just wanted to check on them. But she shot back that after 5 visits, he should know the drill. Then he held out a dessert and explained it was a sponge cake topped with whipped cream made from the best white milk, plus the cakes decorated with fresh fruit. And the prince also brought tea again. Aris had a sweet tooth and figured since he brought cake, he could stick around this time. Rashid told Sienna to be careful, but all she could think was how suspiciously friendly he was acting. Still, she invited them inside, all the while thinking the emperor had officially lost his mind as he entered the building. The guard glanced back like he spotted something, but didn't see the cloaked figure ducking around the corner. It was his sister who decided to tail him, and now saw her brother was heading to the Ruby Palace again. Then she went to the 5th Princess Yvette and reported that the prince brought a ton of sweets for Princess Iris. This time she was just pissed that His Majesty kept coming to this place. And it really got under her skin. With her was Leova Swendiaro, the emperor's 5th wife, who thought the little girl was just a poor kid. But Yvette was still ticked off because she outranked her and didn't get why she wasn't worthy of all this. The princess didn't get why Rashid was being so friendly with Aris, 'cause that girl was a total loser. So she figured that to get her brother's attention, she had to meet this girl in person. Then she wrote her a letter saying she wanted to meet up and have a heart-to-heart over tea. Iris realized Yvette was planning a sneak attack, and it really bugged her, which she told her maid. Sienna thought she was tormenting the little princess, who knew she'd just giggle and trash her outfit when they met. But the girl also understood why, 'cause she didn't know any etiquette and felt like just an empty princess shell. The maids told her not to think like that, saying she was there for her and promised to get Aris ready for the tea party. Sienna was about to spill everything to the princess and scramble to grab some books. But the kid was totally lost. Iris couldn't figure out how a regular maid knew all this stuff. So Sienna explained she was the princess's personal maid. Up till now, Sienna figured the girl didn't want to learn, but she needed to know at least basic table manners. She needed to, or she wouldn't last a day in the Imperial Palace. Sienna started by saying, "You can't drink tea until the host takes a sip. Also, you gotta drink tea quietly. And as soon as you take a sip, you set the cup right back on the saucer, and that shouldn't make a sound either." Princess Iris thought it all sounded way too complicated. Still, she gave it a shot. And to her surprise, she nailed it. The maid immediately gave her props. Next, the girl practiced thanking someone for the delicious tea. And she got another compliment from her teacher. Sienna was stoked that the girl was paying attention and was doing everything perfectly. She was a fast learner. To pump her up even more, the maid started calling the princess a genius, which she totally loved. Unlike nobles who love sucking up, the royal family has to be arrogant or they'll get walked all over. Meanwhile, the emperor showed up uninvited and immediately noticed his sister was drinking differently. Now, His Majesty could see that Eris's manners had changed too. Then he glanced at the maid and knew she was behind it. Sienna was hoping the crown prince wouldn't notice anything. And she felt a little uneasy that he actually did. Still, the maid owed the princess, so she was confident she could handle it and prepared for a positive outcome. Soon, the etiquette training was over, and the next day, Sienna decided to embellish the little lady's dress. Eris was surprised the maid had sewn the dress herself, and Sienna admitted she wanted her to look perfect. The maid hoped the princess liked it and asked how she felt wearing the new outfit. The girl just whirled in front of the maid, asking how she looked. And then, both satisfied, they went to get ready. By this time, Yvette was already waiting for them. Thinking her little sister would be wearing rags as usual today, she remembered scolding Iris for eating with her hands. Thinking she was just some disgusting commoner, Yvette figured things would be exactly the same, and she could make fun of her sister again, which made her feel good. But little Iris was late, and the fifth princess actually started getting bored waiting. Pissed off that she still hadn't shown up, then she heard a kid's voice behind her, thanking her for inviting her to tea. Turning around, she couldn't believe her eyes. That little dirtbag now looked like a princess. Sienna chimed in, saying Iris looked gorgeous, like a fairy from some mythical fairy tale. She was just basking in her own beauty. Convinced she was beautiful because she looked like her mom, the maid repeated that she would be the most charming at the tea party and could win the battle by capturing everyone's attention. Seeing her sister's stunned expression, Iris asked what was wrong, smiling sweetly like she was trying to annoy Yvette. The girl remembered the maid's advice, keep smiling because a smile always wins at the door. Iris also noticed her sister had gone completely pale, but she just said she was happy to see her after so long. Yvette even found it funny watching this little kid try to play princess. But she invited her to the table anyway. The fifth princess admitted she had a lot of news and also remarked that her sister actually looked like a human being now. At the same time, she was mentally trying to figure out what happened to the monster she'd seen last time. Then she saw how meticulously the maid was taking care of the girl and decided all these changes were because of her. But to her sister, Yvette declared she was glad she'd finally grown up, and then dismissively gave an order. She pointed out that her cup was empty and demanded it be filled again. And the maid came over to pour more tea, but Yvette protested, explaining that it shouldn't be the servant pouring, but her sister herself. The girl remembered that even though she'd studied etiquette, she hadn't had any lessons on serving tea yet. Iris realized her sister was trying her hardest to find fault with her, but she picked up the teapot anyway. The little princess knew if things kept going this way, she'd have no choice but to take matters into her own hands. So she knocked her teacup over, splashing Yvette, who jumped up totally shocked. Iris just gave a polite apology, saying her hand suddenly spasmed out. But Yvette started yelling that she'd hurt her. Now playing the big sister, Yvette geared up to punish the little brat and raised her hand to strike. But the maid stopped her, looming over her like a storm cloud, telling her to cut it out while Iris just watched from behind her. The fifth princess was floored by the maid's actions, who then begged her to forgive her sister, saying she saw her set her up. Sienna also added that no one can punish royalty without His Majesty's direct order. It's the law. Yvette was pissed that even though she outranked her, the maid was trying to lecture her on family rules. It was just a formality and nobody really followed them. So the week was supposed to be trampled without a second thought. Yvette knew damn well nobody cared about those rules. And now some maid was trying to call her out on it. Still, she admitted the girl was sharp. So even though her sister learned manners, they really had the maid to thank. Then she got in Sienna's face, asking how she dared touch royalty, and declared she deserved punishment. Right then, her own maid showed up and started yelling, that this maid was trying to humiliate a member of the royal family. Then she shoved Sienna to the floor. And all Sienna did was thank her for teaching her the rules. Stoned. Ares didn't know what to say, especially since she was just a kid. But they decided to get out of there. As they left, the fifth princess yelled that she hoped to see them again and told her sister to just shut up. Once Sienna and the little one were in the carriage, Ares asked why the maid did that, but Sienna didn't know what she meant. The little princess understood that the maid had suffered because of her, taking the whole hit. But this woman defended her, and then Ares suggested they clean up the wound first. When they got to the palace, Ares started dabbing at the scratch with a wet cotton pad, and Sienna realized the princess had never done this before. The little girl got flustered, but Sienna reassured her it was okay, and decided to teach the kid how to treat wounds properly. Sienna explained that first, you gotta disinfect the cotton swab and then dab it on the wound. Just then, she noticed the princess was starting to cry, and figured she was just mad about what happened today. Ares admitted she was a little, but Sienna explained that Ares was just as much a princess as Yvette, so she didn't need to be scared. The maid then added that anything goes and asked if the little one wanted to punish her older sister. Ares was totally down, but she was worried about her maid, and Sienna told her not to sweat it. Sienna promised she'd teach her everything, show her exactly how to do it because she knows the princess real well by now. Then she asked the little girl why it happened, and Ares guessed it was cause she's younger than Yvette. The girl couldn't even believe it was all because of age, and that she had such a low title. So Sienna asked how you even determine a title. Ares explained that it's the difference between having something or not, and Yvette's got power, wealth, and support unlike her. So the maid asked her again, making sure the kid understood exactly why this happened. Ares realized the maid had a mom, and then Sienna added she needed to win over adults to get stronger. The maid explained that it was the fastest, most realistic way for the princess to influence the royal family. The maid also promised to always have her back, but she needed to find someone with major power first. The girl didn't know how to find him, but Sienna said there was one way, and he'd probably side with her. Meanwhile, a guard reported to the emperor that the maid had been sneaking around. People saw her leaving in a carriage. Saul also guessed she went to see Princess Yvette, which made Rashid furious that he hadn't been told about this before. The guard stopped him, explaining what could happen if he interfered in the rivalry between the two princesses. He added that Sienna could get hurt too, and Ares is her boss. Plus, she's a contender for the throne. Sol also added the crown prince is a strong candidate, so the princesses probably won't even bother competing. He even said his own mom would want it, but the guy shot back that Sol was a good friend. But he wasn't going to listen to that crap. The guard then apologized to His Majesty for what he said, while Rashid was thinking that Sienna genuinely cared about Ares. Regardless, he was still bugged about why he cared so much. Then he remembered that even back when he was a teen, he was already a top contender for the throne. No matter how much people supported him, there was one person in the empire who was way stronger. That was Empress Goldria. And because of that woman, his power was basically meaningless. Meanwhile, Sienna was also explaining to the princess that the strongest person around was Empress Goldria. She was the one the girl needed to get on her side, but the princess had no idea how to do that. She figured the empress wouldn't want to meet, but Sienna explained they'd create a situation where Goldria would want to meet. The woman revealed that the empress had another daughter, but she died from poisoning before she even turned 10. That same poison was used on the current emperor, and the story is the young princess accidentally swallowed it and died. And instead of mourning her dead daughter, Her Majesty decided to cover the whole thing up. Of course, she punished those who tried to kill her daughter and son and used it as an excuse to take out her political enemies. In the end, she strengthened the prince's allies and made him the current emperor. But that wasn't all. Sienna suggested that even though Goldria seems like a heartless person, every mom's heart aches for her daughter. That woman distanced herself from her own son because of it, and then over time completely withdrew into herself. The girl could already picture the old empress being delivered the news about the little princess, and even though Ares was still sure it was hopeless, Sienna kept assuring her that this was a golden opportunity for them. Then she asked the little girl to write a letter, saying how much she missed her mother. Soon, this letter was delivered to Her Majesty Goldria. But when she read it, she immediately tore it in half, but they didn't give up at the Ruby Palace. And soon Ara sent the Empress another letter. Goldria didn't even bother reading them, just ordered them tossed right away. She did the same with the next few. The kid kept writing, knowing she was getting rejected every time, but she never stopped hoping to meet her. Finally, the Empress decided to actually read one of the little princess's letters, following Sienna's plan. The letter even had a peach scent, which was a little childish. Sienna knew Goldria was old school, so it would be better to use more elegant language. But she asked Aris to write to the Empress like a granddaughter who thought she was like a spring flower. The girl was still young, and she didn't get how old people could like that kind of stuff. Sienna just asked for patience, and soon they got a reply in the style of the great poet the Empress favored. The maid was overjoyed that all their hard work on the letters hadn't been for nothing and had finally paid off. Eris just told the maid to keep it down and asked how long they had to keep writing these dumb letters. The girl told the princess not to worry, totally confident the Empress would summon her any minute now. She also noticed she wrote like Ruby Palace. While Goldria asked the maid what this princess even looked like, Sienna, the maid, was still waiting for an answer when Eris hurried down from upstairs in her new dress. Next thing you know, the girl tripped and tumbled down the stairs, sprawled out at the bottom, and Sienna freaked out. The maid didn't get why she was in such a rush, but the princess just held out an envelope to her. The servant wasn't sure what the letter was about, and then Eris explained her grandma had invited her to the palace. Soon they were ready and arrived to meet the Empress, where the princess politely thanked her for the invitation. Goldria greeted her granddaughter in a kind of dry voice, but it was obvious she wasn't happy to see her. Then the girl went up to her and explained that she'd prepared a small gift as a token of her gratitude. Pulling out a small bottle, the princess explained they were tea leaves made from acacia blossoms. Eris heard the Empress loved floral teas, so she brewed one up special just for her. Then the little tyke humbly asked her grandma to accept the gift if she was cool with it. Goldria noticed the girl really did have the look, and she saw those violet eyes just like His Highness. Even though Eris was the youngest of the whole family, Tu's eyes screamed royal blood. Then the Empress admitted it was a one-of-a-kind gift and invited her granddaughter to have a cup with her. As soon as they were sitting at the table, Her Majesty remarked that the tea was seriously delicious. The princess thanked her, super happy her grandma liked it. And then they kept chatting, just like in the letters they'd been sending. Eris didn't complain about her life and praised the Empress. Their conversations were kind of pointless, but the sight of the two of them was pretty damn extravagant. They both silently set down their cups, stirring their tea with a spoon and holding back smiles while they drank. Aristia nailed cour etiquette, flawless. No complaints. She even covered her mouth sometimes when she talked. The kid was reciting poems in this delicate voice. Posture perfect. Everything learned just for today. Aristia also mentioned how pretty the garden flowers were, and Goldria decided she could have any she wanted. That totally made the princess's day, and she thanked Her Majesty again. Flashing this adorable smile, the Empress thought to herself what a beautiful child she was, then announced it was getting late and dismissed her. The princess looked all flustered and started apologizing for taking up so much of Her Majesty's time. Then the little one thanked her one last time and headed back to her palace, hoping everything went okay. That reminded Goldria of how her own daughter used to apologize for bothering her and then leave. Her imperial kid always gave her this sweet, genuine smile, and she'd never forget it. It also just crushed Her Majesty that her girl died so young, and it's haunted her all these years. And then she looked closer at little Eris again and was even more convinced. She looked just like her. Back at the palace, Sienna noticed the princess seemed lost in thought, so she asked her what was up. Eris explained that she used to think the Empress was someone without tears or blood, but now she saw that wasn't true. The maid then noticed that the princess's personality had changed a lot, and she was playing such a cute kid that it was hard not to smile. Still, there was one problem, the guilt and if it hurt Eris this much, it was better not to do it again. Sienna asked if the girl felt guilty about deceiving the Countess, and Iris admitted that she didn't feel that way at all. Iris explained that while they were together, the Countess hadn't asked her a single thing about the princess during their whole conversation. After all, a girl who'd lost her mother should be interesting in some way, like her beauty or her knowledge, right? But for Goldria, what mattered way more was how much the little girl looked like her deceased daughter. If that woman knew the real her, there's no way she'd be smiling so sweetly at this little girl. So yeah, the princess basically feels like telling her grandma to go to hell. It even pissed her off a little. But after she calmed down, she asked the maid how well she'd done today. Sienna admitted that the little one had done great, that she was proud of her. And Iris, hearing that praise, threw her arms around the maid. The maid, meanwhile, realized that instead of finding support for the princess, she was making her lose herself. She also thought now that this plan was way too cruel. But she didn't have any other choice. Recently, she bumped into His Majesty again late at night in the garden, and immediately thanked him for his help. The girl explained that thanks to him, she was able to get what she wanted, and then she decided to ask him something. Sienna wanted to know something about the deceased daughter of the emperor's mother, and he just couldn't refuse her. That's how the girl found out about the countess's daughter from the crown prince, and the empress's memories are tied to what the dead princess looked like. Also that she really loved the smell of acacia, what color dresses she liked to wear, and what poems she liked to read. This would seriously mess with the empress's head. And that's all it would take to trigger a grieving mother. That's how Empress Goldria will fall, head over heels for a fake version of her dead daughter. Sienna asked the prince how she could repay him for his help, but he said she didn't need to do anything. All he wanted to know was, out of everyone in the palace, why did she pick Empress Goldria? Rashid then clarified it was just a question, and he was genuinely curious. That's all. Sienna admitted that, back when she was just trying to survive as a powerless princess, this was her plan. She figured she could find some support, so she started digging up dirt on the imperial family. Just like now, she wanted to leverage the empress's grief over her lost daughter. The plans were similar. Thinking about it now, Sienna realized she never stood a chance of reaching the empress from that far away. So she wasn't cut out for the job, but thanks to His Majesty's help, she managed to get to the empire. So Princess Iris managed to pull off that plan instead. And it's all thanks to the emperor. Rashid asked if she blamed him for everything, but she confessed she blamed the family who abused her, but instead of getting depressed, she just kept scheming how to escape. And now she's totally stoked. The emperor thought it was seriously weird that she wasn't blaming her family's killer but was actually psyched. Plus, he thought her face was kind of cute. But there was also something savage about it. Now, Sienna knew that if her plan worked, it was time to move on to the next stage. Soon, Yvette got another letter from her little sister and decided the girl had completely lost it. After a while, she visited her, and Iris thanked her for accepting her invitation and being her guest for tea. Yvette was genuinely surprised, cause just 3 months ago this girl looked like a beggar. But now she totally changed. Then the fifth princess asked her to pour some tea and explained that this time, she wanted the maid to serve her, and Yvette reminded the maid that she'd screwed up last time, asking if she even realized what she'd done wrong. Knowing she was just some low-level maid, she figured it'd be easy to get under her skin. Sienna poured the tea perfectly, but then Yvette decided to complain about why she was staring at her. The maid just apologized, but the fifth princess kept insisting she was blatantly glaring at her. Then Yvette decided the maid was mad at her, but Sienna denied it. After that, the princess explained to her little sister that this maid needed to be taught a lesson since she didn't learn it last time. Then she ordered a whip to be brought, but Iris demanded her sister stop, saying she wouldn't forgive her if she touched Sienna again. Yvette used Corancria, not understanding why the brat was counting on Granny's help and now dared to act this way towards her. She admitted she knew everything and then decided to share something the little girl didn't know. Yvette asked why Iris thought she could rely on the Empress, even if she was His Majesty's biological mother. She also said that the person the girl was relying on was powerless. Since the emperor hadn't spoken to her in ages, the fifth princess confessed that everyone knew Rashid taking the throne was a done deal. Except little Aris. She couldn't wait to see that woman fall and thought the kid was just dumb for picking someone who was buttering her up. That's when Her Majesty showed up. Surprised to hear such filthy words coming from a young lady's mouth, Yvette was completely stunned and lost her voice for a second. Not understanding why the empress was there, Eris immediately ran to her grandma and tried to explain while the empress asked what was going on. The little one explained she was having her first tea party and invited her sister, but figured she messed up and admitted she was ashamed now. Then the little princess also pointed out there wasn't an adult in her palace who could teach her things properly. The empress looked at the girl, realizing she didn't have a mother, and promised she would help her. While Livette was wondering how Goldria dared show up, she started scolding her for insulting a child. She yelled that the fifth princess was totally looking down on the kid, while treating Eris like some innocent little lamb. Then Her Majesty snatched the whip and laid into that so-called princess's hands. She'd heard Yvette was trying to punish a maid, so she decided to show her how it's done. That's when the fifth princess started claiming she was His Majesty's descendant, so Goldria couldn't touch her without the emperor's permission. But Her Majesty was like, "How dare this chick threaten me with my own son?" And that just set her off. The empress told Yvette she could ask anyone what they thought about it for all she cared. Even if her son disagreed with her decision, he still wouldn't ignore his sister's disgusting behavior. Then she ordered Yvette to hurry up and lift her dress, and she couldn't disobey the command. The next thing she knew, she got a smack, which made her lose it and call Goldria a crazy old hag. After that, she got another smack, even more painful, and started screaming that her mom wouldn't let her get away with this. That's when she showed up and immediately wanted to know what the hell was going on. But seeing the empress, she just thanked her for personally taking charge of her daughter's education. Then she told Yvette to thank the Dowager Empress immediately as well. The fifth princess couldn't believe it. She honestly never thought things would end up like this. Still, she bowed before Her Majesty, thanked her, and admitted that it was all her fault. Soon, Iris was happy that her sister turned out to be so useful, even though she'd made her sweat a bit beforehand. Sienna was also glad she'd asked for her help before leaving, but she wondered if the little one was okay. She confessed that she wanted to ask her something. She was curious why her mother was forced to die. The girl learned from the records that when she'd begged for help, no one had lifted a finger. Her mom was really sick at the time, but for some reason, the doctor refused to come and examine her. Eris didn't dare ask her grandma about it, now knowing she really needed her. And besides, a princess wouldn't ask stuff like that. Sienna saw the little one was super bummed and explained that it was okay to cry if she needed to. Even though she hoped Iris's heart wouldn't be broken, Sienna knew there was a wound there that couldn't be healed. The girl, still crying, screamed that she hated everyone and wanted them all dead. And the maid figured her plan had flopped. The former subject who seduced the emperor not only got his favor, but also became a member of the imperial family. Back then, she was already pregnant and worried that the empress mother would turn her back on her like everyone else had. After Goldria announced she wanted nothing to do with His Majesty, Rosemary gave birth to a child. It was a beautiful princess, and the palace was decked out with jewels and packed with people. The palace at that moment was far from reality, and Rosemary apologized to her daughter that all that was really here was hypocrisy and malice. Now, even though the palace was a battlefield, Sienna wanted to use the person who killed the princess's mother. She knew the kid didn't owe her any affection, so she just hugged the girl, feeling super sorry for her. Then, Iris hugged the maid herself, asking what the next step was, making it clear she was gonna milk this old hag for all she's worth. The maid knew that even though it was twisted and cruel, they'd be boosting the power of the princess and the emperor's mother. After a while, Goldria got worried that her granddaughter hadn't visited since that tea party, so she decided to drop in on her. When she got to the Ruby Palace, the maid reported that someone had tried to poison Princess Iris. The empress rushed straight to her granddaughter, and Sienna added that the little one had received a poisoned dessert as a gift. Luckily, the poison wasn't lethal and wouldn't last long, and the doctor assured them that the girl would recover soon. Still, the princess's body was weak, and there's been no improvement yet. And Sienna also confessed that she couldn't reach Her Majesty. The maid started apologizing, but the Empress told her to stop, knowing that she was the one to blame. And then she hugged the little girl, asking her to get well soon and not to worry about a thing. Yvette even heard the news and was stoked that her sister couldn't even get out of bed. She claimed it was because she was talking back and explained that's what happens to people who try to scare her. While she was sharing this with her mom, a servant came in and reported that the Empress mother had sent her a gift. Goldria asked that it be conveyed that it was for her favorite granddaughter, and that she wanted them to forget what happened together. But the dessert was really a warning that all of Yvette's actions would come back to bite her. The Empress also requested that the princess eat every last bite, since she poured her heart and soul into that dessert. Taking Her Majesty's warning to heart, Yvette and her mother vanished from the history of the imperial family forever. After that, Goldria often visited Iris and took care of her so she would recover quickly. The girl explained that she was already much better and there was no need for the Empress to visit her so often. Her Majesty understood that the girl needed to rest and promised that she would visit her a little later. This tea's kind of bitter, Iris thought, and the maid explained it's cause of the medicinal herbs they put in. The princess didn't get why she was acting like she was on death's door, and the maid said poisoning is seriously no joke. Iris was like, it was just a little tummy ache, saying Yvette sent her stuff like this all the time. She also admitted she usually just tossed it, but now she figured she could use it to her advantage. Plus, Iris wanted to use her grandma, and when the time was right, she'd ask why she never helped her mom. The little kid thought she was being a bad person, but she was still glad things were working out for her now. And the maid told her, you just can't survive in the imperial palace if you're trying to be good. Then the princess hugged her maid again and begged her to never leave her side. Right then, Sienna remembered again, asking Rashid what she could do to repay him for his help. He kept saying he didn't need anything, but she kept pushing, and he couldn't think of a single thing to ask for. So he asked the maid to move into his palace. And Sienna froze for a second, totally lost for words. A little later, these twin maids showed up carrying a bunch of dresses for the princess to try on. Sienna checked them out and thought pink would look good on Eris, but blue would look even better. The maid was kind of stumped, seeing that both outfits were gorgeous, and now she couldn't pick which dress was best. But then the princess came out and told those maids to stop bothering her own maid. They agreed and then started asking Eris herself which dress she liked the most. The girl declared that anything she wore would look amazing on her. And the seamstresses agreed. They were even surprised how sharp she was at such a young age. And Eris confirmed that yeah, she's pretty smart. After they left, the princess got all angry, muttering that she hates all women except Sienna. But the maid explained to her that if they wanted to stay together for a long time, they'd need help from other people. She also said it was in case the princess needed something and she was busy, or just as a backup. Then Sienna promised she'd find maids who would love the little one as much as she did. After that, twins named Nini and Nana were sent to the palace, where they'd be working from now on. They swore they'd serve the princess faithfully, and Sienna explained they could be trusted since they were Choo-Choo's friends. But the girl didn't like that they looked identical, 'cause she wouldn't be able to tell who was who. Days went by, and the new maids kept gushing over the princess, saying she was beautiful and elegant. They also took good care of Eris, explaining she had to stay healthy and maintain her grace. Sienna was happy that everything was going well, and the princess was growing up to be a pretty, confident girl. She herself was going to visit the prince, where they prepared a dessert for her since she was considered an honored guest. The maids were so committed to taking good care of her until His Majesty, the Emperor, arrived. Meanwhile, the maid looked around and noticed that with its high ceilings, the living room felt more like a garden. What felt even weirder to her was that she, a regular maid, was now being entertained like a VIP aristocrat. Soon, His Highness arrived, showing up with a few of his pets and giving her a sweet smile. Sienna told him he looked kind of strange, but Rashid explained he was just taking a walk with his adorable little buddies. He also admitted that's why he was late, and now he was gonna properly welcome his guest. Then the emperor stood up, gave a slight bow, and expressed his gratitude for her coming to his palace, but the girl asked him to get straight to the point and not hesitate to ask her for something in return for his services. Sienna explained that the princess was waiting for her. And then the emperor decided to get down to business and explain what he needed. Then Rashid, smiling, added that he really wanted to treat the maid to some dessert and offered her a piece. The girl was surprised that was all he wanted, but let him put the piece in her mouth. And the taste was amazing. The prince explained the dessert was made from top shelf ingredients. And it's got this amazing fruity aroma. Sienna figured the palace had a seriously skilled chef. But Rashid confessed he made the whole thing himself. That made the maid practically choke, and the emperor thought she hated it. But she explained she was just super surprised. Then His Highness admitted he loves to cook. And it's also a way for him to spend time with Sienna. Right then. The girl couldn't believe this was the crown prince. The guy they said was totally heartless. His Majesty also confessed he's a sucker for cute little critters because they just make you happy looking at him. And Sienna, watching His Highness at that moment, remembered a story and decided to share it with the prince. She told him about a princess from the Winter Kingdom who, despite all her grandeur, this princess absolutely hated the cold and couldn't even leave her bedroom with the fireplace blazing until a bird flew to her and took pity on her. The bird wanted to snip off a piece of the sun and give it to the princess, and soon, the girl received this gift. That lucky ray of sun finally helped the princess find a way out of the room. The emperor couldn't believe it was true, but the maid swore that it was. Sienna also admitted that the story came from her hometown, then asked where the prince knew it from. His Majesty confessed that someone told him when he was a kid, but sadly, he can't remember who. Rashid thought it was the only clue, but he eventually realized he was wrong on the way home. Sienna still couldn't figure out where the prince knew that story from, since she made it up as a kid. Plus, she only told it to one person, and couldn't believe that person was the crown prince back then. After a while, the girl met up with her friend, Choo Choo, again and thanked her for sending her friends. Sienna explained that she saved a whole hour because of it and also noticed that Choo Choo had become an official maid. She thought she just got lucky, but she understood that she was a pretty capable worker. While the other maids were busy explaining what her triceps were good for, she got invited to Princess Grace's palace. This princess was royalty. So Choo Choo, feeling like a total country bumpkin, was a little thrown. Then she remembered the promotion exams were happening too and realized Sienna didn't even know. Judging by her friend's face, Choo Choo figured she didn't want to take it. But the maid explained it had only been a year since her appointment. Right then, her friend started insisting she didn't know anyone more capable than Sienna and was sure she'd ace it. Choo Choo also added that it had broadened her horizons, and passing the exams would give her more authority. Plus à l'aise. Sienna realized then she and her friend could eat anything they wanted. But what really got the girl pumped was the thought of buying awesome gifts for Princess Edis. Sienna even pictured herself quitting being a maid after all that and opening up her own little shop. The girl agreed, even though she had no clue how it'd go. And when she showed up for the exam, she found out her name wasn't on the list. The twins explained to Sienna that it was because she was a foreigner. And folks like them didn't get recognized as mid-level maids. Even with her killer skills and tons of experience, she and a few others still got passed over for promotions. This is gonna make things tough for them. They're already getting work to the bone and paid peanuts. When Princess Iris found out they failed the exam because of that crap, she went ballistic and vowed to fight the decision. But Sienna begged her not to, saying it was already settled, but the little Spitfire wasn't backing down. The maid kept pushing, adding that Iris shouldn't bring it up with her grandma, cause it could seriously backfire on her. The girl started pleading with the princess not to stress so much over her, and said she'd get another shot someday. But soon that chance came knocking. Only she bombed the exam because she was too skilled. Still, the examiner had an offer for her, and she was going to put in a good word with the Dowager Empress if everything goes smooth. Then the teacher can bump Sienna up to a mid-level maid. The Empress was flawless, especially compared to the Empress' four concubines. Any one of those girls could have been Empress. and now one of them is asking Sienna for a favor. The girl knew it was a request she couldn't refuse. And that's when the youngest wife, Angela, came out. This lady looked way younger and more innocent than the maid expected, and she greeted her guest right away. Sienna didn't waste any time either. Bowing politely and saying it was a pleasure to meet her, Angela learned the maid was 18 and remarked on her excellent manners. Even though she hadn't been working long, she also noticed Sienna was as modest as she'd been told, admitting she was curious since she worked for Princess Aries. Then she added that Goldria was currently turning a castaway into the perfect princess, after Angela asked the maid to follow her, requesting that what she was about to see must stay a secret forever. In the room, a little boy was playing with a robot, and the lady explained that this was her son named Lacey. Then she had the maid start training him, but she wasn't expecting him to be another Aris. After that, Angela asked Sienna to think over her offer and give her an answer. And the girl promised she would. She also noticed this kid was different from the others, but there wasn't a single word about Angela's son in the records. She brought it up with His Majesty, hoping he'd heard something about the boy. Sienna also added that it was Lacey, the fourth prince, and he'd be 12 this year, since he lived outside the palace because his father wasn't interested in his kids. There wasn't much info on him. The boy staying at Marquis Wilhelm's estate for educational purposes, and there were also rumors of some kind of scandal involving that empress's wife. The emperor figured the kid had some issues they were trying to hide, so they wouldn't let him see him. Angela wasn't letting anyone see her son anyway, and no one in the palace had seen him since he was born. Still, the lady intended to officially introduce Lacey to the imperial palace when he turned 12. Rashid realized then that if even the maid was asking questions, something was definitely up with the kid. He admitted he was actually stoked because he thought she was just there to see him. Sienna wanted to ask His Majesty something else, but he repeated that she shouldn't worry about the fourth prince. The maid then stated that she still needed to think about it, because the boy needed her help. Anyway, she got some intel from Rashid and wondered how she could repay him. He explained that Sienna had already repaid him, and then added that Princess Aris would be worried. Later, the maid told the little girl that she'd been offered to tutor the prince, but Aris immediately flew into a rage. She declared she'd never allow it, and insisted that as her only mistress, she wouldn't let her leave. Sienna then explained that she wanted to become a mid-level maid, so she had to take this chance. Lady Angela can break through the wall that she herself can't because of her social status. On top of that, the maid was worried about rumors if she became a third-tier servant, so Aris decided to give her half a day off. The kid admitted she didn't want Sienna to do it, but she also didn't want to take away her shot at it either. The maid thanked the princess, knowing she'd be able to do way more stuff later than she could now. That's when the twins came up to Aris, promising they wouldn't let her get bored. But she wasn't feeling that idea. But what calmed the little one down was knowing Sienna would still take care of her until she became a mid-level maid. The servant understood that even though she wasn't that great at it, she'd do whatever it took to help the empress. Angela was stoked, she agreed. But she also knew she was probably thrown off by the sudden request. The girl couldn't even believe her mistress was thanking a maid, then asked her to hammer out all the details. Sienna explained that the lessons would be 5 hours a day, right up until the boy's birthday. If the results are good during that time, her mistress would bump the maid up to mid-tier. Angela was a little surprised because she figured the witch would want precious stones, but it was clear she was way greedier than that. The girl explained her greed was directly proportional to the help she'd provide to get the best results.